going to start with the Federal Clean Water Act. EPA wrote the Federal Clean Water Act in 1948, I believe it was. They delegated authority for the Clean Water Act to the Washington State Department of Ecology, who wrote the State Water Pollution Control Act to implement the Federal Clean Water Act. And then Department of Ecology in 1998 wrote the Dairy Nutrient Management Act to narrow the focus on livestock nutrients and water quality. So it was originally called the Livestock Nutrient Management Act. It's now called the Dairy Nutrient Management Act, as it does just specifically apply to dairies. That Dairy Nutrient Management Act was delegated to the Washington State Department of Agriculture in 2003. So things have been moving around a little bit. A big piece of the Dairy Nutrient Management Act, of course, is the Dairy Nutrient Management Program. That's us within the Department of Agriculture that implement that specific regulation. A chunk of that Dairy Nutrient Management Program and Act involved the Dairy Nutrient Management Plan, which is what you're all here to talk about today. That Dairy Nutrient Management Plan that applies to all of the licensed dairies in Washington State really is in place and influenced by so many different state, federal, local regulations. Here's a couple of them. Well, one of the newest regulations is the Nutrient Management Rule, which is 16611, which talks about the specifics for record keeping and penalties. Now, conservation districts have a hand on top of the dairy nutrient management plans. They are the writers, the approvers, the certifiers. You might also have a consultant or a technical service provider helping you implement or write it as one of your dairy nutrient management plans. Again, it comes back to the conservation district. Local ordinances have a role in those dairy nutrient management plans. Whether you have a plan or whether you don't have a plan, sometimes the local ordinances can impact the way those plans are implemented in different counties. And our CS, of course, has their hand in the dairy nutrient management plans. And, of course, the Dairy Nutrient Management Act itself, again, requires all licensed dairies to have a dairy nutrient management plan. Dairies, obviously, play a role in this. When you look at this whole big slide, it looks like a kind of complicated family. And we are all related, and some of us get along better than others, but it is a family, and everybody has their hands on the Dairy Nutrient Management Plan, which all dairies must have. So there is an easier way to look at this. I didn't start with this particular version of federal, state to dairies, because I wanted to recognize the fact that it really is a very complex relationship between all of the different state, federal, local, and non-governmental organizations that impact the dairies and the Dairy Nutrient Management Plan. What I'm really going to talk about today is just how the Dairy Nutrient Management Act and the Nutrient Management Rule is implemented through the Department of Agriculture through the dairies. So that's what we're going to work. The Dairy Nutrient Management Act, RCW 9064, has very specific requirements in it. And for the dairies, the requirements are to register. When you're a new dairy, just licensed, you send in a piece of paper to the Department of Agriculture that gives us a little more information on your facility. It gives us information about cow numbers, whether you're a composter, whether you're associated with an anaerobic digester, things like that that we wouldn't normally get from just a message from our food safety program that tells us that you're a dairy. You are also required to develop a nutrient management plan. Within 6 months of getting your license to ship milk, you have to have an approved nutrient management plan by the Conservation District to work. Within 18 months of that approval, or 2 years after you've been licensed, you have to have a certified nutrient management plan by the Conservation District Board. Now, technical service providers can write this plan, but they still have to go through your local conservation district. The other requirement is to maintain records, and we'll talk a lot more about maintaining records, and that's that WAC 16611 that I talked about just a little bit. That's what helps clarify some of those records that need to be maintained. And you must prevent discharges. So, of all of the whole Dairy Nutrient Management Act, when you just look at this list, it doesn't look too terribly overwhelming, but the devil is in the details, and I do realize that. So the Dairy Nutrient Management Act also has some requirements for the program that implements the act. We are required to inspect dairies regularly, and it's our policy to inspect dairies every 18 to 22 months. We are required to monitor the development of nutrient management plans and the implementation thereof. We're required to investigate complaints and initiate a compliance pathway. We'll talk a little more about that. Our program is required to maintain a database. We have an electronic database that is supposed to be tracking all of the interactions that we have with different facilities around Washington State. And we are required to maintain a penalty grant account. So if we've gone down that compliance path as far as a civil penalty and a facility has paid a penalty to the Department of Agriculture, it goes into a penalty grant account. And it's that grant account that's held just within our program that goes back out to provide education and research opportunities specifically for dairies. And Nicole mentioned that the Department of Agriculture helps fund this particular outreach and education program, and it's from some of the monies that are funding today's event came from that penalty grant account. So that's another requirement for us. So let's talk a little bit about inspections. There are a couple of things that we're really looking for when we come onto the facility that we are required to track. Facility condition. And this is all in the name of water quality. We want to know how your collection and conveyance systems are functioning to manage the manure that falls onto the ground. Where is it going? How are you keeping clean water? Not so much an issue on this side of the mountains as it is on the west side of the mountains, but are gutters up in place? If the gutters are kicked out and there's a lot of clean water going into your lagoon, you may not have the storage capacity that you should have. So gutters, curbing, how are you keeping manure in? Facility condition, we'll walk around the facility. We look at lagoons. What's the capacity of your lagoon? When are we out there? If we're out there in November and your lagoon is at 95% capacity, we're understandably going to be a little bit concerned about your capacity to make it through to an application season. Dike condition, what are the solids levels, things like that. We walk around the lagoons. We want to know what's happening there. We may look at your fields and filter strips. Are they functioning to filter or to have the appropriate buffers to manage the nutrients that you're applying to those fields? We look at record keeping. And sometimes it's the record keeping piece that can take longer than going around the facility and looking at some of these things. The record keeping piece is the legislation that was implemented in 2012 that requires all dairies to keep 5 years worth of very specific records. Speaking of which, here's one of the records that we require to see 5 years worth. On all of your fields, we want to see a complete soil analysis every 3 years, and every year we want to see a post-harvest soil nitrate analysis. So when we're looking at records, and of the 4.5 inspectors in Washington State, I'm the half, believe it or not. This is one of the records that I want to see first, because it will tell me how much more I need to dig into some of the other records that are required. If I look at a soil test record and I see, and nitrates are really the thing that we're focusing on in our program, and I see there are only 4 parts per million of soil nitrates, then I can make some judgment that if this record and the previous 4 years worth of records all have these low nitrate values, well, number one, you may need some more nutrients on that field, but primarily, you're not over-applying nutrients. That means I'm probably going to spend less time scrutinizing those application records. So soil analysis records are required. Nutrient analysis records are required. If I see high soil nitrates, high phosphorus levels, then I want to know how much nutrients you were applying when you were applying manure. And this is key for us and for your conservation district, your technical service providers, to being able to tell you that if you put 1,000 gallons on, here's how many pounds of nitrate you're putting on your soil, or here's how many pounds of total nitrogen and available nitrogen you calculated out. So nutrient analysis records are required. Application records. Now this is kind of a long, wordy slide. These are all the requirements in law. Here's what we really, really want to know. We want to know where that manure was applied, when it was applied, what was applied, was it lagoon slurry water, was it solid, was it commercial fertilizer, how much applied, what crop it was going on to, and what the weather was doing. Now the weather is actually a key one that a lot of people miss. By rule, you're supposed to be recording the weather 24 hours prior to your application and the day of your application. Those go with your record, your application records. A lot of this information we can actually get from other records that you keep. How much nutrients you were applying, you can get that from your nutrient analysis record. So a lot of people I've seen very effective record-keeping sheets on calendars, because that automatically gives you what day it was applied. But you can write down a little sunshine icon for it was a sunny day today when I applied. It doesn't have to be really precise. One of the things that we look for increasingly now, is there a door prize associated with that?
There may be a door prize.
That's automatic detention.
So you have to mess up though. I can't tell you what it is. When we look at a nutrient application, we actually, it's not required by rule, we would like you to look 3 days out. Look at the weather forecast. If it was sunny yesterday and it's sunny today, but 2 inches of rain, less likely on this side of the mountains, is predicted tomorrow or the next day, then maybe today's not a good day to apply. So one of the things we really want folks to start taking into account is what the forecasted weather is going to be. So, fair requirements. And I keep waving this piece of paper around. I promise I'll put it down. But this is a handout I brought, and they're up here at the main table, and it lines out all of these record-keeping requirements. If you don't want to go look for the rule of regulation, you can pick up this handout, and it has all of these things listed in it. So let's see, manure transfer records. This is part of your nutrient balance. We want to know where you were sending your manure, who received it, and you are obligated to provide the recipient a nutrient analysis because that helps them make good agronomic choices. So provide them with a nutrient analysis, whether it's a liquid or a solid. So transfer records, and that applies if you're receiving manure or nutrients also. And then irrigation records. This is the last one. And Nicole has another speaker. Troy Peterson's going to come in. He's going to talk a lot more about irrigation records. They're pretty important here on the east side. Again, not so much on the west side. Things are definitely different. One size does not fit all, but irrigation records are something that we need to look more closely at as it relates to water applied and nitrate leaching. So, I'm also obligated to talk about third-party manure applications, custom pumpers. It's a little bit confusing, but if you hire a custom pumper to move your manure to your field or your manure to somebody else's field, and you hire them, then they are an agent of the dairy. They're your employee, essentially, and you're responsible for that application that they make. If they come in and take your manure and drive off and apply to somebody else's field that's not under a dairy nutrient management field, a dairy nutrient management plan, then that's their deal. If there is a discharge from that application, then actually it would be Department of Ecology that would respond and address the issues associated with that application. If it's your hire and your land and your manure, then the dairy is actually responsible. So the other thing I need to bring up, which some of you probably heard some murmurings about, is the proposed manure application certification legislation. There's a lot of shows. At the governor's request, the Department of Agriculture, Department of Ecology, Department of Health, and the Conservation Commission drafted language that would require all manure applicators to have a certification. And it would be very similar to the pesticide certification program that is already housed within the Department of Agriculture. It would be similar. Right now, the proposed language says anybody applying manure to more than 20 acres. And it is specific to manure, not necessarily cow manure. It also applies, it would be applied to chicken manure. And anybody who applies manure to more than 20 acres would be required to be certified There would be other requirements such as annual reporting. The application could only go on a piece of land that had a plan in place with information about crop yield, soil, etc. There is a lot of unknowns about this proposed legislation, and there's some wiggle room in the legislation, even if it does get passed, in that the majority of the details would be written in rule. So one of the comments that we've heard a lot of is that there hasn't been a lot of stakeholder involvement on this proposed legislation. If it passes, and I don't have any guesses on whether it's going to pass, then the details would be written in rule, and there would be a lot of stakeholder involvement. And the other thing that I have to say about this particular piece of proposed legislation is that if you have comments, please contact my boss, Jenny Prest. You can contact me, but contact my boss, Jenny Prest. She's actually collecting comments about the proposed legislation, and she's kind of collating them for when she has to go in front of a hearings board for the legislation. So send those comments to Jenny Prest. Also, the Z draft language is out, and I can send the draft language out to anyone who's interested. You have my contact information, so you can email me, and I'll email it right back to you.
I was just wondering why they didn't have stakeholder involvement before they do it.
Well, I can't answer that. I don't know the answer to that. I know that it was a pretty short turnaround to get the legislation, the language in front of the powers that be. But I don't know. And again, with the proposed rulemaking that goes along with this legislation, there would be lots of room for stakeholder input. That's the majority of that input. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about investigations. Some of the things that we would do if we showed up at your facility, we would, number one, we'd contact you, because an investigation is really only effective if we're communicating with the person that's involved. We're trying to identify the source. We'll probably review your records, samples, if discharges involved with surface water. We work with the stakeholders, which could be you, that are involved in the complaint, and then field staff write a recommendation for enforcement. Once that recommendation for enforcement is written, it comes to Olympia. It actually comes to my desk. We review the recommendation for enforcement in Olympia, and then we'll make a determination whether we go forward or perhaps even go backwards down the compliance path. We'll talk a little bit about what compliance looks like here. The path that I keep speaking of is very specific. We are required by law to provide regulatory technical assistance. So if we see a water quality issue, the first thing we're going to do probably is talk to you about it and say, we have some recommendations on how you can meet the requirements of the law and minimize your risk to water quality. If that regulatory technical assistance, working with you, working with the conservation district and the other providers, is not effective, then we can send a warning letter. If the warning letter doesn't work to correct the problem, then we go to a notice of correction. These three steps from notice of correction up are all considered informal compliance. If the notice of correction doesn't work, we have some formal compliance tools in the toolbox. One of them is an immediate action order, which we almost never use. It's just very rarely used. It's a very short letter that says, you must do this to stop this. More frequently, we use a notice of penalty. Now, there's a pretty interesting statistic. Of all the water quality compliance issues that are identified, about 95% of those issues are resolved with informal enforcement. So very few issues ever go to the formal enforcement or the civil penalty phase. So that's good news. I want to end with this thought. In addition to the Dairy Nutrient Management Act, that regulation and all of its associated state and federal regulations, our program really relies on its mission, which is to protect water quality, but also to help maintain a healthy agricultural business environment to direct the way that we do business with you. We do this through good education, technical assistance. We do this through equitable enforcement of the regulations. And we do this through good communication with our sister agencies, with other stakeholders, local governments, non-government, and with dairies. And we really try, instead of using that Dairy Nutrient Management Act as a tool to enforce water quality regulations, we try to use our mission and those associated communication and technical assistance as the tool to help implement the rules and regulations that apply to all dairies in Washington State. Please, if you have any questions, let me know. If you don't want to ask them right now, send me an email or give me a call. My contact information is on that handout sheet that you all have. So